Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the next in the door.
Well, how are you?
Doing good.
All right.
Alright, sir.
3 that I can make.
Yeah, as long as you're here.
Derek, your mom is a trooper. Dollar General, the whole area.
Good, how are you?
We offered to give her grabbers and
Warm weather to cold weather, my body's been
like,
shocked
oh,
today.
okay.
Yeah, I never know.
I sent her
coffee
a
and
reply.
tea, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it looks amazing.
We're okay.
Off to drive by.
We filled about a dozen of those lawn and garden sized bags full of
Oh, yeah.
trash and debris.
Actually, I think I have a picture. I took a picture before I
Left, but you guys were still working.
Vicky usually phone, I think I got it here. If I can find it. Oh, there it is.
I'll call the order of the meeting of April 2nd, 2019. Can I have a moment of silence for all those serving inside and outside our borders, please? All right. Will you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Can we have roll call, please, Mary?
Mayor Adrian Sandoval,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Larry Clark,
Here.
Harold Leggett, Nick Ralston,
Here.
Spencer Bradnan,
Here.
Troy Blum, Hope Morris.
Here. Alrighty. I'm going to entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Audience participation. Do you have credit? No. Alright, I'm going to move on with the proclamation. It's National Library Week. So whereas our nation's libraries support free and open access to literacy programs, books, computers, and other resources to help children and adults learn to find, evaluate, and use information they need for jobs, health, housing, education, and other needs. And whereas 86% of Colorado libraries offer access to online homework assistance to help learners bridge the learning gap and reach their school and career goals, and whereas Platteville's public academic school and special libraries fulfill the critical role of providing tools to build a literate community for young children, their caregivers, parents, and educators, and whereas Platteville's libraries offer general internet use training as well as technical training to help people apply for jobs, gain essential technology skills, and obtain crucial education to life-changing opportunities as a part of the 21st century workforce. And whereas Platteville's public libraries are often the only free source of internet access in their communities, providing a vital link for residents to technology information and facts about the world in which we live. And whereas libraries provide a space for civic engagement and empower their communities to make informed decisions by providing free access to information which promotes the free exchange in information and ideas for all. And whereas these roles fulfilled by the Platteville Public Library supports these cornerstones of democracy, now therefore, on behalf of High Plains Library District, let it be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville proclaim National Library Week, April 7th through the 13th, 2019. We encourage all residents to visit their local library and explore and engage with your librarians. Because of you, libraries create strong communities. Thank you, guys.
Speech.
Okay. Actually, I'd like to introduce two of my staff members I have with me today. I have been with the Platteville Library for 22 years. 23? I don't know. One of the two. Naomi has been with me for 18. Derek has been with me for 16. My other staff members in Platteville, Megan has been with us for 9, and Aaron and Yesenia have both been with us for 5. And that's a combined total of 75 years between the 6 of us.
That's awesome.
And we are in the middle, we just started renovation. We are renovating the 3 bathrooms. So we are now closed except for the hours of 4 to 6, because we have no bathrooms and we have no water. We expect to take somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on what they find when they get underneath the floor with the plumbing. So we hope it's no more than 4, but chances are it probably will be. So, did you have something you want to say?
I do. So because we're closed, I didn't want to end our story time for a month. So I wanted to thank you for sharing this room. We did have story time in here this morning. Spencer, your daughter, was one of us. It was really nice to have a place to go so that my kids weren't homeless. We will be here, not this next Tuesday, but the other Tuesdays from 10:30 to 11:30 if you want to peek your head in and see what we're doing. You may get colored on. You may be recruited to help us play with our colorful parachute. It's a lot of fun, and it's nice to have some extra people there. So it doesn't have to be just little kids. So thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you guys.
Yes, thank you very much. Grab some treats.
Thank you.
Twist their arm.
I don't know if I'll be able to eat with this twisted arm.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the meeting, minutes for the meeting of March 19th, regular meeting Board of Trustees, and the minutes for the March 26th special meeting of the Board of Trustees.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carried. Action items. Right now, I'm going to recess the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. It is 7:06, and call to order the meeting of the Platteville Liquor License Authority at 7:06 p.m. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. As previously discussed with the board, there's a group of citizens here locally and outside of Platteville that want to put together a fundraising event. It's a horseshoe tournament in honor of Gary Sandow, who's a long-standing member of our community in our state, as far as that's concerned, because he was pretty well known statewide. The event is scheduled for June 22nd. It's a Saturday, from around 10 to 10 roughly, give or take. Looking at bringing in literally dozens of horseshoe two-person teams to I'm not sure the whole format, but it's going to be a long day. They approached me about it here a couple months ago. I thought the town could help sponsor it because of the liquor license. They don't have that ability to do that. They had mentioned as far as the proceeds, all the course registration for the horseshoes would go to Mr. Sandow's name to Relay for Life. And they mentioned in exchange for the town helping them out, we can split the proceeds from the beer garden. The board may want to just donate all that as well. It's up to you. I told them that if we did split it, that's why I put it toward the rec department, because we're using rec facilities to help offset some of their costs. But that's what it comes down to. I wanted to attend myself to support it, but my son has a baseball tournament that weekend. I know a couple in the front office said they'd help work the beer garden because we manage it. And then 1 or 2 in public works that they'd help out as well. So that'll be covered for the event. And we would take care of and control and all the alcohol regarding to this permit. And Mary has in there a map that has a black fenced area of where it'll be. It's in the fenced in area of horseshoes and mud volleyball. So everything will stay in that confined area. I don't foresee any security issues, let the police department know, but with this group of gentlemen, I think it'll be pretty well self-contained, pretty well organized. But that's all I have. Any questions you have? On the proceeds, how do you feel about the proceeds from the beer garden?
I am personally okay with giving it back to Gary after our costs are taken care of. He's very important in this community for a lot of people. But I don't know how the rest of you guys feel. That's fine.
Those are just the proceeds from the beer garden?
Just the beer garden.
Not the entry fees?
No. Now what will happen is the town will we'll purchase the alcohol, we'll manage the distribution, the sale of it, and then, taking all the money back here. Once we pay off the cost, then the rest would be the profit proceeds that we could write a check with deposit, write a check to, the group that's doing it for Mr. Sandell, or probably to Relay for Life, because that's where it's going, under his name though. Okay.
Do you know if this is gonna be an annual thing?
It sounds like it possibly could.
They're
I
just gonna
mean,
see
because Gary was a pretty large contributor for Relay for Life. I think he was platinum. I'm not sure what level that was as far as dollar amount, but they definitely want a lot of firefighters, a lot of his close personal friends over the years. Want to keep this going in his name, and I think it's a good journey for them.
It's really important in the high school and all the schools and tons of activities around.
No, statewide for all of his wrestling and refereeing, and also for his fire training statewide as well. So, I miss Gary, he's a good man.
Yes.
And there's no charge to hold for that over there, right? Not charging anything for that.
No. And just so you know, coming up, I know Reggie Gordon had some contact with another gentleman that had a friend that passed away from cancer, and he also was part of a Relay for Life thing. So I can see this, and that's something we support, because this other gentleman, and it's a side note, but we'll probably have another special event from it later this year. They go to other communities like Windsor, Greeley, and Evans, and they won't reduce fees or give any cost cuts, which is something I don't believe in, based upon what they're trying to do. So I think Platteville's a good place for them, and they're good. They're good for the force of what they do. So
I don't know if it's gonna be an annual event if every year we don't take some of the beer money, right? But for the first time.
First time, I think that'd be
I
good.
think so. You know what I mean?
And then that way we can gauge this year what it brings in, to make sure he meets that.
Quite a bit.
Probably, because they asked if we had lights, that tells
Right.
you.
Yeah, it goes till 10 and it's a bunch of horseshoe players, I'm just saying.
Yeah, so,
That group doesn't really drink a lot of beer anyway.
no, not at all.
Famous last words.
Not at all. If it's a warm day,
So all the proceeds are really didn't come, and they're not charging anything for entry fees for the tournament or anything like that?
yeah, there'll be interviews for team, just like Harvest Daze. I'm not
Right.
sure what they're charging now, $20.
We don't have anything to do with that.
Right, yeah, okay.
And I don't know what formatting, if they have single champs, double champs, mixed or whatever, I don't know all the details yet. So,
I make a motion to
Well,
approve this.
hang on, sorry.
Too late?
No, we need to, I'm gonna close the public hearing if there's nothing else, anything from the public? Okay, I'll close the public hearing at 7:12 and entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve a special event permit for an event to be held on June 22nd, 2019 at the Platteville Community Complex as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mary, do I need a roll call for liquor authority? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. Going to adjourn the meeting of the Platteville Liquor License Authority and reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees at 7:12. Okay,
Point of order, Madam Chairman. Do we need a motion to address the issue of the beer proceeds separate from the approval of the liquor license authority? Do we need a separate action
I don't
to
believe so.
distribute the funds?
It was discussed by the board as part of the permit, and it will be outlined in the minutes. I think we're okay.
Okay.
That's a good point. Yeah.
okay. Moving on, action item B, Community Center renovation proposal. I cannot talk tonight. Mr. Rankin.
I've been working with David on this for the last month or so. I'm going to defer to David for details.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. We have been working feverishly for the last month trying to figure this out, if we could get this done. It's an obvious item that the board has been talking about for 2 or 3 years as far as trying to renovate that and update the community center, and obviously came to a little bit more of the forefront when the senior center was completed. And everybody thought that looked spectacular, and the other building looks like it's been there for 35 years or whatever it's been. So we have been working with a local general contractor, and then we contacted a fair number of vendors ourselves. Right now you have a spreadsheet in front of you. Dave Peach in Construction was the first column, the town's bids were the second column, and then what I called the team bid is the last column, which is kind of a blending of the two that we're talking about. Anything in yellow is basically something that for the most part you see that in the town column. Those were items that we didn't end up getting numbers on ourselves. And in some cases, Mr. Peachin's bid included a couple things wrapped together where we had a bid on one item but not both. So, like the third item down, exterior door and office window, that number is there, but then we had exterior doors for $14,000, but we didn't have an office window price. So a little bit of that, it's somewhat confusing. Basically, there's $100,000 in the public facilities improvement fund that was budgeted for 2019 to do this. Right now, with the blending of the two, taking some of Mr. Peachin's numbers, taking a couple of our contractors that had better numbers, and blending the two together, we're coming up at about $106,050 to do the project. We pulled out a hot water heater. We pulled out doing the HVAC right now. We have 2 furnace units and 1 air conditioning unit that are old enough that we should plan on replacing them. But at this point, because they're still functioning, and as far as we know, they're still functioning well. That's not to say we won't have an issue next week or later this year or something along those lines. But right now, in order to stay as close as we could to what the board had originally budgeted for this project, we've decided to pull them out, and we'll probably add them back at next year as a line item to go ahead and replace those. And part of the reason we feel comfortable doing that is the furnace units and everything are actually another part of the building, so it's not like that work has to be done to finish the renovations. We're not going to tear something else up to put those in or anything along those lines. So that's part of why we opted to pull that out. Hot water heater, the same thing. It's functioning for now. It's been working fine. There again, it's in another part of the building. We don't have to do that work right now. It's not like the windows where we're gonna, when we tear the window out, then we need to put the new casing and that kind of thing, or drywall up to it, or whatever we're gonna do. So that's part of what our mentality was in pulling those things out. You can see that Mr. Peachin had demolition costs in there. We're gonna use public works staff. We're good at tearing things up. What are you laughing about? We can go in and do that and not have to pay his labor to take care of that. The guys, that's something that we'll be able to do. The dumpster, it's really convenient. The cleanup days is 2 weeks away, so we'll just use one of the cleanup day dumpsters over there at that facility and take care of that and get that done. So those were some items. I mean, we were able to knock $3,600, $3,700 off the budget just right there, So at this point, if you've got any questions, I will attempt to answer them. But, well, before I go any further, we did just get the report back this evening. It came in about 6:30. Colorado asbestos inspection. We talked with Barry over at Safeville, and he said that because we are a municipality and because of the potential public exposure in that building, if we're starting to tear things up, that we probably ought to test the materials. Even though the building was built late enough that there shouldn't have been any asbestos, they recommended, because a lot of that was donation, maybe it was old tile that was sitting in the back of somebody's barn that got put down on the floor or whatever. The good news is we came back clean. So we tested the popcorn on the ceiling, we tested the vinyl floor tile, we tested the grout, and the tile that was used in the kitchen and the entryway. And so Combination of all that, we came out good, because otherwise we probably would be spending the entire budget just on asbestos mitigation, not counting any renovations. So that was one thing that has gone really right with this. Mr. Peachin has been very responsive. He has really hustled over the last 2.5, 3 weeks to try and find contractors that could potentially meet our time frame. Right now, we're shooting for the 4th of May, which is the first, and we actually have the 2nd week of May as well before we have a rental scheduled in there. So at this point, everybody has verbally agreed that if we get the okay tonight, that we're gonna pull the trigger on things tomorrow. He's gonna order doors and windows, he's gonna order the countertop, some of those things that have a little bit longer lead time. We'll probably have public works staff in there before the end of the week, tearing out the cabinets in the kitchen and doing those kinds of things. So, but it right now, it is, as best we can whittle it down, we're $6,000 over the $100,000 mark that we had, which is 6% of the budget. And just because I know how construction projects go, I would ask the board to approve at least $110,000 for this, because I'm pretty sure we're probably going to find something else that's going to cost us a little bit more than we had anticipated. So,
Yeah, I was thinking 10%, so 116,000.
and that's, I mean, that's definitely the board's prerogative. When I visited with Mr. Rankin earlier today, some of the other items that were budgeted in the public facilities fund for this year either aren't going to happen or are late enough in the year that part of that may end up getting moved to next year. So we technically do have the funds available. It's just, you can see the line item that was set up for this.
2 things on mine, if I may. As far as the budget is concerned, we currently have a little over $200,000 in the public facilities fund. We budgeted $100,000 for this project, another $100,000 for public works, which would have wiped the fund. I told David, this is my priority. Public workshop expansion can wait. It's just, plus we want the progress street to get done, at least on our side of the property, before we start looking at how to expand the shop, because that just makes sense practically. I don't want to be in their way. And if something comes in at the end of the year, then we can revisit that. Also in that fund, we looked at budgeting $25,000 for a hired contractor to do the town hall master plan. Let's hold off on that. We're not ready for that yet. So my goal is at the end of the year, we'll be under budget. We want to do budget amendment. So I think this should be a number 1 priority. The last few times I've been in the community center, I'm embarrassed. It looks horrible. So my point on what David's doing, David really did a good job with Mr. Peachin and in our crew. From the beginning, the theme was to keep the same colors theme, to match the senior center. We could have done more, but this is what I call a facelift. New flooring, the epoxy flooring will pretty much last forever, never, the way it's built. And we talked to several contractors that said just that. The wainscoting on the bottom, initially that was going to be more of a soundboard type, but we opted not to. It's more of a wood. It'll be stained. All the light wood will match the darker wood on the senior center side and what's around the new bathrooms. On the lighting, it made more sense to drop it down a foot, 18 inches, to basically do a drop ceiling a little bit. Then that way all the cabling and wiring above can be hidden, just like right this room. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. And in that front office that's been used for storage since the inception, basically, of the community center will be our new rec director's office, with a window like Christy has on the senior side for customers and people coming in. So that's, it's a pretty basic option. We're not doing anything with the stove yet, the refrigerator, or the sinks. Right now they're functional, they work. But those are later add-ons, besides the HVAC systems and the heater that will have to be.
So the senior center and the exercise room, they're on a separate water heater and HVAC system?
They are on separate HVAC system. I think they tie into the same hot water heater.
And we don't use a whole lot of hot water. I mean, there's no shower in
Do you want, I don't know, it's, 1,500 for, water heater, cold water. You said you'd taken that out of the budget, you wanna leave that in? And it doesn't seem like it's too big of an expense if we're gonna, sounds like we have a little bit of a budget there to play with. Do the hot water heater, how old is the HVAC and the hot water heater?
I'm not sure on the hot water heater, I don't know the answer to that. One of the HVAC, one of the furnaces it was either 14 or 16, I don't remember, there was a 4, it was either 4 years less than 20 or it was 14, I don't remember for sure. And the other one is original to the building. So it's 40 plus, or what was that, 86?
86.
So 30 plus, so it's lived its life, but right now it hasn't given us any indication that it's about to pass into the next world, but,
David, question on the HVAC systems, what would you say? Would it be the 13.6 or the 20.5?
it would be the 13.6, because we would use our contractor. We got a much better offer from the gentleman that takes care of the library, takes care of our stuff here. They do all our service work. They just replaced a unit and an air conditioner at the museum. It's A1 heating and air out of Greeley, and
they're good.
They've always been very responsive for us when we need them to be. And we put the new one in the museum, and they cut the library a 10% break on their new one. So
I'm getting deals over there.
I told Diane she owes me half that 10%.
Dave, I have a question. It's unusual for a general contractor to share his work with, in this case, the town.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me some kind of sense of his attitude towards this proposal? Of the town doing some of the work and the general contractor performing the rest?
Sure.
I mean, there certainly would have to be a healthy understanding going in.
And
where he lives doesn't make any difference to me.
Okay.
This is really has to do with the nature of the construction business.
Okay. As the mayor pointed out, Mr. Peachin is from Platteville, number one. So he wanted the opportunity to have his name associated with doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Wants to take some pride in helping. And I've had the impression from him that by being willing to work with the town and allow us to cut some of the costs by doing some of the work ourselves, some of the labor that he and his crew would have been doing and that kind of thing, it was his way of helping and donating back to the community some. He did have a little bit of reservation as far as using a contractor that he hasn't worked with, because he's not sure about how that person may show up to jobs. Will they actually be there when they say they're going to be? That kind of thing. That's totally understandable. This is a contractor I've never used before either, so I can't vouch for him necessarily as far as this flooring goes. But they did assure me that if we're able to pull together tomorrow, that they would have us on their schedule within a 2 to 3 week time frame. And that the materials we were looking at were not a special order or anything along those lines as far as this epoxy flooring and that. I feel like Mr. Peachin, from the beginning, I told him that, you know, there might be aspects of this that we were doing our best to do it for, we wanted to do a quality job but have it be as inexpensive as possible. We didn't, I don't use the word cheap, but I did use the word, we wanted to spend less than more, if at all possible. And I feel like he really would like to a certain extent, like I said, feel like that's kind of his contribution to the community as a whole. He is a member of one of the service clubs here in town. They do use the community center at Harvest Daze and stuff like that. So for some of their fundraisers. So I think that there's a certain amount of personal pride that that this is kind of his contribution.
You understand why I asked the question. I don't even know the man. I'm not calling him into question or his company or his integrity or anything like that.
Right.
More after 4 decades in the construction business, and I'm somewhat familiar with how the relationship between general contractors and customers and their subcontractors normally is performed. And if you feel comfortable with the relationship in shall we say, altered normality in the way in which the contract is performed.
Right.
Then I'm good with that. I just wanted to get some sense from you. And a sense from Mr. Peachin that this is, the way in which this is going about, is being gone about, is out of the ordinary to some degree.
It is, from the first time that I met with him, I told him that basically his competition was town staff and the contractors that we talked with. And I asked him from the very first day about the option to potentially blend this. He did have some reservations initially. The more we've talked almost daily for the last week and a half. As far as various numbers, hey David, this isn't gonna work here. You know, the initial price from his electrician, you know, we bid not putting the lowered ceiling in, but after we saw the numbers for the drop ceiling and how much easier that was gonna make some of the electrical, the cameras, some of those kinds of things, and I honestly feel very good that I feel like Mr. Peachin would do a good job for the town, is willing to work with us in this situation. I have not used him as a contractor for us in the past, only because I haven't had a project like this necessarily that to try and accomplish. You know, normally the town would be going in and replacing the 2 furnaces and an air conditioner. So I just go directly to that contractor and we deal with that. We deal with the flooring situation, so we get a hold of a flooring contractor and we just deal with that. Haven't had where I've needed somebody to help coordinate, and that's the biggest thing, and that's part of what we're paying Dave for on this. He's not gonna be there every minute of every day, but he's going to make sure that we're on track as far as the timing. It depending on the windows, that's one of the biggest things, and from our vendor and from his vendor, they weren't 100% sure that the windows were gonna be here. However, most of that work could be done at a later date in between if we had to, because we're not changing the window opening size. There would be some cleanup and some trim work that would have to be done around them at a later date. And that's a possibility, but he, at this point, his vendor was fairly confident that they would have the windows in time to get it done. So, to answer, long-winded answer, but I feel like things will go okay. I feel like he's okay with where we're at with it.
Right, I just felt obligated to.
Fair enough.
One other thing about the HVAC there, if you feel comfortable with it, why don't we just get it done now this year? Because I mean, I think you jinxed it by saying we're okay with it now. But if you're okay with deferring some of the town funds for, you know, the expansion of the shop.
Yeah. He's okay with that.
Well, So I guess what I'm getting at is, I guess if rather than leave one lingering thing out there like the HVAC, the water heater, just if we're okay with deferring public funds for more public buildings to next year's budget, and then you wouldn't have this lingering or looming over. You just have this done and washed, and you're complete. You don't walk away.
I agree. You know, my goal is to stay within budget, but if you're willing to push back the public workshop expansion and not doing master plan for town hall, there's $200,000 in the bank as we speak. To me, this is a priority for the community. And you can prove to 130,000. Let's just get it all done.
Well, I don't see anything in here about like security cameras. You guys planning on doing anything on that side? As far as that goes?
That's not part of this renovation project, but that'll be after that.
It's a separate line item.
some of the wiring is part of the electrical bid in this, so that we have we specified where we wanted the wires. We wanted the potential for 4 cameras in the main room. We wanted 2 cameras in the kitchen area. We wanted a camera or 2 in the lobby and the office area there, with cameras, wiring for cameras on the outside of the building as well. So that is there, Spencer, but it's not part of, we've got a separate, I want to say under buildings and grounds or something, we had cameras allocated in the 2019 budget, so.
Will there be Wi-Fi in the community center?
Already is.
There is now, we add that to the senior side, it covers the whole building.
I tend to agree with Nick that betting on a 40-year-old furnace is folly.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take money out of your budget too.
Well,
But
no.
if you both feel comfortable with it, I mean, me personally, I prefer rather getting rid of it because, like I said, I don't want to jinx the whole thing and get this nice new
updated building that we can't heat or can't cool, as the
can't
case may
cool
be.
it, So,
Well, and you know the cost will go up by 10% this year.
yeah, I mean, it's not going to go
A
down.
40-year-old furnace is well beyond its
And you know, I don't have a
expected
problem with this, but this is the beginning of the year, you guys. We have to stick with our budget. Then what's the sense of making a budget if we come into next year and say, oh, well, then we can add this to it, and we go over the budget, and in the year, we have to make,
So,
what is?
regardless, say it goes out, then we're dipping into it in the budget shot anyways. I mean,
But we
there's
don't
always
know if we're
unexpected
going out.
variables that you have to.
No, I understand that, but I wanna try to make you guys understand, this is the beginning of the year. We have to stick with our budget. I don't have a problem with replacing it,
Yeah.
but we can't be doing this every time there's a.
Oh, no, it's the first time I think I've spoken about this.
Right, we have to stick to a budget, or this
Yeah,
doesn't
no, I
make it
understand
work.
that.
That was my goal, to stay within budget, but in order, Dave and I talked about this, in order, actually this happened before meeting, in order for me to propose this in a good conscience, my proposal is not to pursue the other 2 projects in this fund, to make sure we're within budget, which is the plug works expansion and the town hall master site fund.
But if something else happens, that money's spent. And we need the money for.
Well, this isn't general fund, this is public facilities, so it has to go for the public facilities project, so.
To say we kept it with this and just approved what 116, left it at that, and then not replace the hot water heater and the HVAC, then say worst case scenario happens, it goes out during Harvest Daze. It seems that, with me, it usually happens at the most.
You were jinxing us tonight.
I'm not, I'm just trying to wait on the side of caution, that's all.
Now it'll go out.
I certainly see your point, Hope, but.
And I don't have a problem with replacing it,
I
right?
think we just do, we want the community center to be a source of pride in the community, right? And why not just do it one time and do it right and be done?
Well, and I understand, and I don't have a problem with that. I said I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I know.
The thing is we have to take caution, it's just at the beginning of the
Absolutely,
year, we have to go all year
Certainly.
with all these.
Yeah.
budgets.
And it would be a lot, we probably wouldn't be talking about this if Mr. Rankin didn't have funds of Mr. Brands to throw under the bus for us.
I call this an early year reprioritization of projects in public facilities. How about that, Phil?
I'd like to interject a quote from the construction business. We don't have time to do it right the first time, but we've got time to come back and fix it later. It seems as if you're gonna put $110,000 into the building. Why not address a known problem, and the problem being a 40-year-old furnace, and do it all at once and be done?
I think we already said that we were gonna do that.
Well, did we?
Yeah, didn't we all agree that?
Yeah.
I said I didn't have a problem with it being
Oh.
done, but we need to stick with
I
the,
thought we were
no.
entertaining the reminder to stick
Well,
to
we
the
do
budget
have to
that we
stick
made.
to, I'm a very budget sticker.
I understand.
She's a budget sticker.
You make a budget, you stick to it, I do at home.
But in light of that, you're gonna defer some of these other projects that were in the budget.
Well, that's
The
something
money
that
is
we have.
available and still within budget in the overall picture.
And that's what I want the board to discuss tonight, all the parameters and the factors. So technically, it goes over the budget. literally, it goes with this line item, but not the fund itself. If we don't pursue the other projects, which might close, we don't do that. I'd love to have another bay or two bays for floating works. I still have a goal of consolidating our equipment, so we're not running all over town. We're better now. I mean, we have a temporary source we can have a little rock on. But, those are things that can wait. Those are not urgent. It's not like something going out. I mean, it's cold storage. And down hall, we're still
you're waiting for the fire department to finish up doing what they're doing anyhow.
Yeah, initially I wanted to start doing some planning for our town hall site, but is that an urgent priority? No. That's a wish list right now.
What was the cost of that? I can't remember what the cost was at.
Well, there's a proposal for just under 25,000, but talking to David, we can probably work with an engineer or planner and do a lot of it in-house.
Okay.
With some consulting help, because I don't design buildings, obviously, but I did reach out to TCC, who had it on the senior center, and also Landmark Builders, and got some preliminary cost estimates, and when the time comes, we can work with them more directly.
So it's not totally off budget, I mean, maybe.
It's one of those projects where I would wait till fourth quarter of the year before it's in reevaluate.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, okay. So it's not totally off the budget, just want to have a side.
Never say no.
Well, yeah.
But I'd say just push those back. So
I'm gonna make a motion to approve an agreement for services with each of the selected contractors for the requested renovations in a total amount not to exceed $130,000, pending review by legal counsel and authorized mayor to execute the same. So that gives us the funds for the furnace as well as the 10% contingency on top of the $106,000 that you presented.
Seems reasonable.
A second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call please, Mary.
Harold Leggett, Nick Ralston,
Aye.
Spencer Bradnan,
Aye.
Troy Blum, Larry Clark,
All right.
Hope Morris.
Yes.
Okay, Carrie. It's exciting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, David.
That wasn't sarcasm, was
Nope.
well, I'm gonna hear about it now. You don't get to put it first shot.
And thank you to your staff for being willing to do that sort of work. That's certainly outside of their job description normally.
it? You take out some aggression, Dave Brand's gonna be doing most of the work tomorrow.
I didn't love church stuff.
Moving on, Platteville Irrigation and Milling Company Annual Water Lease Agreement. Mr. Rankin.
Actually, I'm gonna defer this end of this following one to Mr. Brand, because you're both within his ballpark.
Thank you again, Mrs. Mayor. This is
Thank you.
the annual agreement for the town owns 13/24 of a share of water on the Platteville Irrigating and Milling Company ditch. We only use about 1/24 of that at the cemetery. That's the only place in town that we can use that water right now. It is an irrigation water right only. We don't have the ability to get the water from the ditch down to the parks or any other location right now. So we don't have the option to use it anywhere else. So to protect the town's water right and to protect the value of that water right, we have to show consumptive use, because if we don't show consumptive use for the full share or for the full portion that the town owns, then eventually if we ever tried to change that water right or do something else with it, somebody would be able to prove that we haven't used that full water right, so we don't have a right to change the full water right. That's all. Don't ask me to explain any more than that, because that's about the extent of my knowledge of water law right there. But this share has been used by the Sarchet family for years. They opted to, they offered to help us. For many years, the town had bid this out, leased it. Then there was a large number of years where the town did not document, did not lease it out officially, but the ditch rider still continued to assign this portion to the Sarchets because they had for so many years been the successful bidder. He thought they owned it. He didn't realize that it wasn't their share to have. So they have signed documentations and an affidavit that those shares were used even on the years that we did not have the documentation, the lease documentation from them. For the last 2 years, the town has leased the share to the Sarchets for $2,500 for that half a share in the Platteville Irrigating and Milling Company in 2017 and 2018. So this year, I talked to him, and if you've ever dealt with farmers, they are very good businessmen. So he was not a happy camper when I mentioned the idea of raising the price a little bit, but he was not willing to let the share go to somebody, that half share go to somebody else either. So he has agreed to the $3,000. So at this point, I would ask the board to approve this so that we can go ahead and have Mr. Sarchet sign it, and we have the documentation. I think the value for the town is way more in the documentation and the consumptive use. They're able to prove the consumptive use at some point later in the future. If we try to change the water right, than the actual lease amount that we're getting right now. But that's my opinion on things, so.
I'll move to approve the Platteville Irrigation and Milling Company annual water lease agreement as presented and authorize mayor to execute the same.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alright.
Thank you.
Moving on. The influent pump replacement upgrade. Mr. Brand.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. This is one that I was not planning on this year, otherwise we'd have had it in the budget already, and it would be more of a formality to move forward with this. At this point, we did not have these two pumps slated to replace, but having said that, we still will be within the sewer fund budget and what is set aside for maintenance and repair of the system. We have $50,000 in the sewer fund set aside for that, and in the last several years we have not come close to that number. So the $16,000 that we're talking about for these two pumps, basically the original T-Series pump made by Gorman Rump was designed in the 1960s. We don't have an official installation date, but it's estimated to be late 60s, early 70s that these pumps were installed in our Platteville main influent pumping station. They have worked well. We can still get parts for them. However, in a pumping scenario, you've got the internal pumping portion, the impeller that's inside, but then you've also got the cast iron casing. Both of those items continue to wear, the impeller more than the casing, but the impeller is something that is considered a wear item, and we do replace that periodically. However, with these pumps being as old as they are, the casing is starting to wear, and you can't do anything about that casing wear. And so the tolerances or the space in between is getting greater. And what we have learned in the last 60 to 90 days is we not only have a rag problem coming into the lagoon, but those rags pump through these pumps, and when there's more space in between the impeller and the casing, then that tends to allow them to hang up and create issues. In the last 60 days, the guys have pulled a couple of cantaloupe-sized rag balls out of the inside of these pumps, and until the last 90 days, we've never had issues with them ragging inside the pump. We've had the rags in the lagoon on the aerators, we've had the rags on the check valves inside the lift station. We maintain those. We were doing that once a week, now we're doing it twice a week for what's hanging up on the check valves. And we're getting increased rags now. One of the pumps ran for 8.5 hours the other day, and the typical run time is only 3 to 3.5. So for it to do its job, it had to run 2 to 3 times as long. So we're going to continue to wear out motors and have other issues with it. One of the things that I was looking at is there a way to put a bar screen or something ahead of the influent pumping station so that we could catch the rags and pull them out? The best price I've gotten is about $80,000 for the bar screen system itself without the installation. So all told, we'd be $100,000 to $120,000 to do that. We will end up with a screen ahead of the new treatment facility, whatever it ends up being, but that doesn't solve the issue for the rags hanging up in the pumps and hanging up in the check valves and that kind of thing. So the least expensive, most viable option for the time being right now would be to upgrade from the classic version of the T-Series pump to the new T-Super pump or the Super Series that they started manufacturing in 2000 or 2001. Several of the parts are still interchangeable between the classic and the super, but one of the things, as you can see in your diagram, I had done the Eradicator upgrade kit. If you look at that picture, there's a tooth on the back side of that, it's a serrated blade on the back side of that will chew up pop cans, softballs, diapers, underwear, kitchen towels, dentures, pretty much anything that we get that comes down a sewer system, this thing will chew it up. Now, that doesn't solve our issue for the rags going into the lagoon, because they're just going to be smaller pieces, but the thing that it will help us with, we think, in the lagoon for the time being, is it'll be smaller pieces that hopefully won't hang up on the aerators as bad as well. So hopefully we can pass them through. Now, we've got years of material in the lagoon as it is. We remove the material as the guys clean the aerators and we take it out and we throw it away. But this is the best option I've been able to find for the current problem, plus the fact that the casing on the existing classic pumps is starting to wear, and that's part of what's causing the issue here. So that's a long way to say that I would like $16,000 out of the $50,000 budgeted in the M&R system to get these new pumps purchased, and then we had a quote for about 40. He said the exact quote from our installer was, if it goes like it's supposed to, it'll be a $1,200 day. If it goes like it probably will when you're dealing with a sewer plant, it'll be about a $4,200 day. But I did not ask for those funds right now because I didn't know what that amount was going to be, but that is well within either my authorization or worst case scenario, I would go and beg the town manager for approval to go ahead and get that put in. But all told, it's going to be right around $20,000 when it's said and done, is my guess. So.
And the $50,000 we budget annually, roughly annually for M&R, I mean, there's no set item. I mean, this covers these things that we typically come up with, whether it be dredging, pipe replacement, these kind of pumps, so on and so forth, just so the board knows that it wasn't budgeted for something other specific. It's a reserve fund for M&R, the sewer fund. Same thing with water. So,
David, what's your opinion? So this, as I understand it, it's like an industrial garbage disposal.
That's a great term for it.
Right. So what's the concern that now that we're grinding up this litter, let's call it rag, generalize it, that we're going to be dispersing that, since we don't collect solids in our wastewater system, the lagoon, are the stuff that we're going to grind up going to get dispersed into the river eventually, I guess is what I'm getting at?
No, I don't anticipate that at all for multiple reasons. With our current lagoon system, we're going to put it into the existing cell where the bigger rags are going anyway. So we're not changing anything from the way it's currently being done. Okay? So if then we feed from the primary cell where we have most of the trouble into the secondary cell where we're having some trouble with debris. But by the time it gets through the second portion of the secondary cell, in the north side of the secondary cell, we do not aerate at all, so we're not stirring and mixing, so everything settles pretty well in there. We're not hanging up rags going into the wetlands, and even if some of the smaller particles were to get through towards the wetlands, the root system and the reed system with the wetlands, I think, would hang it up to a point that we won't. I don't envision any of that going out. Now, having said that, these pumps are still gonna be used, so this money isn't being thrown away, because these pumps will still be used to feed whatever our new treatment technology is. And when we start feeding to either the SBR or the gross wind system, there will be either a primary clarifier or a screen, and the screen will be fine enough that it will actually pull out even the minced rags and debris.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve a purchase agreement for 2 Gorman Rups, did I say it right?
Yep.
I'm sorry, pumps for an amount not to exceed, what, $20,000 you said?
The 2 pumps themselves will be covered by the 16,000, but the installation, if you wanna go ahead and authorize that, would be 20, yes.
Okay, not to exceed $20,000, subject to review by legal counsel and authorize mayor to execute.
Second.
It's the same, I'm saying do it.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Mary.
Nick Ralston,
Aye.
Spencer Bradnan,
Aye.
Troy Plum, Larry Clark,
Alright,
Hope Morris,
Yes.
Harold Leggett.
All right.
Thank you very much, and I know that the public works staff will be very excited. We did talk to one of the vendors, or one of the other operators that is using this, and he said it took his maintenance from a monthly to an annual.
Wow.
Debris that was hanging up on it,
Holy smokes.
so.
Oh, enjoy the new garbage disposal. Okay, moving on to reports. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you. And I know the board authorized a pretty large chunk of money tonight, but, we budgeted close to $2 million in total expenditures for capital projects and stuff, so I really won't worry about a whole lot. Mr. Green was in today. Our auditors, Clips and Washington, were here today. They'll be here through Friday. Mr. Green did a better job than normal preparing all the information for them in advance so that they won't have to be on site as long as normal. So in turn, I want to approach them at the end of the day, reducing our annual audit, to be honest with you. No joking in there. But there's a number of bigger projects we still have to tackle. So budget-wise, I feel pretty good about it right now. So, you know, a lot of property tax just came in, I think, Friday. Devin told me about 1.7 million in the bank that we're gonna need that up front. And then as our projects, just so you know how my mind works, it's kind of scary. But as the summer projects end and we still have a surplus, that's how the last 10 years we've always had revenues over expenditures. Then I start putting money back aside. So that's kind of how this one works. I submitted a fairly detailed report or summary for a number of projects. It's that time of year, obviously. A couple of just updates, because from the time I type this on a Thursday afternoon prior to meeting, things sometimes change. Still waiting on the agreement back from Track B. Tomato side one potentially could be going in this week. They found a contractor that can set the pole. I'll find out more about that probably tomorrow or Thursday. I think Todd's been talking to the contractor, is that right? Probably. I mentioned the West Farm Development, XL Energy projects. Dave and I was contacted by email today by Greg Larson from Union Pacific regarding the County Road 30 closure. We're going to meet with him, I think, on the 22nd of this month. Because what will happen is when they close that, they'll go back on County Road 30 from 85 to the east, 200 foot outside the right of way, and that's where they close it. That's where they barricade it. So we need to talk about that new potential frontage road, where that's going to be. And his question today was, do you want to put that in there with your right of way? My immediate response is no. I don't want to pay you anything more. Why are you paying for North Main Street? Almost 8,000 a year just to drive open the road for businesses. So we're going to be with him in detail, talk about that.
This is a new gentleman.
Greg Larson, we met with him for UP. Is he the right-of-way specialist, basically?
Real estate.
Real estate. So I'm going to see if I can negotiate lower price for Front Street, cause that,
It gives them like over a mile stacking, doesn't it? Closing 30?
yeah.
That's a big thing.
10 years ago, when I started managing, I remember we were paying, the town's paying about $3,500 a year for a lease on North Front Street. Now it's close to $8,000. And it's essentially it's a one-page lease. You can drive in the right of way, and we shall charge you what we deem is fit. So,
Railroad sneaky.
I know.
Those guys.
Nick, I know. Look, present company excluded, it's tough sometimes.
No, I work, I know. Know how frustrating it is.
On code enforcement, Dave helped me with the interviews. We interviewed 4 people on Friday. Over the weekend, we thought about it, Monday, Dave and I talked, and there's 2 that honestly I can't decide upon, which is good. I mean, the interview went pretty well. I'm gonna, since Carl's back now from vacation, he's still on days off, he's gonna come in tomorrow, review reports. I've asked him to sit in again with Dave and I to do a couple of follow-up interviews. And then, hopefully by the end of tomorrow, by the first thing tomorrow, or Thursday morning, I can offer conditional. And I'll send Safe a 30-day notice of termination on the current agreement. There's a lot of code stuff pending right now. I mentioned already the loss control out of Sursa went well. On the 16th, the next meeting, I'll have the Tri-State Fireworks contract. And I mentioned the explanation that instead of 5,000, they need at least 6,000 due to increase with tariffs and fireworks, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And they locked us in the same budget the last 4 years, so I don't have a big concern with that. Mary helped or put out on Indeed, is that right? Indeed is the rec director position posting on.
It's on Indeed in the Colorado Parks and Rec Association homepage,
Yeah.
whatever, job board.
I think it was yesterday, Reggie came out, chatting with a little bit, and I told her, we were chatting about it, I said I've received over probably 20 so far. Mary corrected me, over 70 so far, but only 20 that she's passed on to me that actually meet some kind of qualification. And then I'm waiting on, since this, we also put it in the Tribune, I believe, or newspaper.
The local shopper,
That's right.
she
Right.
wanted to try to get somebody from this
Yep.
area, but that wasn't published until the 15th.
Well, word's getting around because Gordon came in this afternoon and he said, you know what's funny is somebody actually asked me why we were retired. They didn't know we were retiring. I told them I retired 4 years ago from school district, and Reggie's now officially retired. It's open for advertisement, for applications till April 26th. And I kind of summarized that in my report to the board. And then interview, background check process in May, and hopefully start the first week of June. That's my goal. Indicated transition. We have someone leaving Public Works as of next Friday, moving on for job opportunities, self-employment. I am short of a vacancy in the front office as of last week. Now I'm going to meet with the front office staff about tomorrow afternoon, and I'll move forward and discuss with them how individuals filling that position. And with the front office, when vacancies occur, positions come open, I always like to sit and do a round table with the staff to discuss how things may be improved upon. And that's what it comes down to. So the new officers being hired, or being trained, I should say. So it's a transition period. I was teasing Diane, she keeps everybody in the library, nobody ever leaves, so she left. A couple of side notes. Friday, I received a referral from Tom Parko, the planning director for Will County, on a residential large lot subdivision immediately north of Rogers Farm. Mr. Hill owns that property, it's public record. I reached out to him, I talked to the mayor already, that per our IJ with Will County, I notified Mr. Parko that I wanted time to negotiate with Mr. Hill the annexing of Platteville. So I left him a message and waiting on a call back. And that's how IJ works, that they will put the application of Will County on hold and give the town, whatever town may be, an opportunity to work out some kind of a deal. So lot Lot 2B, there's 2A and 2B north of Anadarko is purchased by Evergreen Industries. They're willing to suit a building for now, National Oil. They submitted a site plan. Les and I reviewed part of it today. So that will be coming in front of the Planning Commission, the board, likely in May. Because they want to start breaking ground by the end of June. So that'll be a nice addition to the Energy Park. It's a nice looking facility. The conditional review use is because, like, almost identical to Ready Services, they have a lot of on-site storage. So if industrial property has over 50% on-site storage, it needs a review use approved by the Planning Commission Board of Trustees. So that's coming your way. And lastly, before any questions you have, I've been doing a lot, as the mayor knows, with parking issues around town, both on street and on private property. Been reviewing the code. I don't think tonight, maybe the night to talk about in detail, but for our regulations, there's no restrictions on how many vehicles the property owner can have. The only on-street or private property, actually, let me go back, on-street violations would be inoperable or abandoned. I have to prove they're not inoperable or abandoned. Inoperable means either not licensed, not insured, or not operable. You know, and people will say, well, it's operable, and I'll just tell them, start up and drive around the corner. Prove to me it's not, you know, inoperable. Flat tires, stuff like that. Abandoned is hard to prove. I don't know a vehicle on any public street in Platteville, because I drive the streets every day, that's abandoned. People may have own a car that they never moved, but it's not abandoned. It's by their house. You can park, like in front of my house, if somebody wants to park in front of it, I can't do a darn thing about it. Okay, that's just blown off that. That's most communities, most cities, unless they have restricted parking, and they have a parking meter person doing it all day long. On the properties, you can park on the driveway and the side yard setback on a hard surface. So you can't park on the grass right in front of your house. We have some. We got to clean those up. You can park in your backyard. It's on a hard surface. Properties are allowed 2 inoperable vehicles if they're, and this is changed by the board about 8 years ago or so, if they're classics. And what happened is the board changed that years ago because we had some gentlemen in town that had, you know, about, you know, my age, and they still had the old high school car. It doesn't work anymore, but at some point they want to fix it up, an old Mustang, Camaro, whatever. So the board authorized up to 2 of them behind a fence in the backyard, cover them up. Not parked vehicles for mechanics, stuff like that. We have some of that going on. We're trying to clean that up. So hopefully, and I've warned the 2 ladies I'm interviewing tomorrow that they got work to do when they get hired on, and they're fully aware of that. But
Sounds like you took the job of
Code enforcement.
code enforcement. Thank you, Larry.
well, code enforcement in most communities is under the police department. It always has been. When I was chief, I dealt with it. When I became town manager, it somehow got to me, and part of it because I live here. And I decided that I would oversee it. I don't want to do it. I want to oversee it in conjunction with the chief. Carl will still be under his jurisdiction as far as authority. Police officers, no offense to them, but they become cops to do code, but they still have to when the time comes. We just need somebody that can talk to the community, work with them, understand difficult property situations. I've always told the board in my whole career, the community doesn't care how many tickets cops write. They care about you talking to them about trash in the backyard. They always will. Or their dog, or their camper. It's personal. That's the way it works. So, I kind of want just a brief input from you tonight. Some communities have on-street limitations as far as how long a vehicle can be parked, i.e. Gilchrist has a 48-hour rule. Impossible to enforce, I'll be honest with you. And I don't think we need to go down that road. But some of the properties it's going to get worse before it gets better. Living here, I know people are moving in together, their families are moving in, their kids are moving back home. There's more vehicles in the streets, especially in certain parts of town, like Old Homestead, Stevens Circle. You just can't deal with it. I mean, if you go by on a Friday night, my wife and I've driven around town before, if if I wanna go visit Adrian or go visit somebody over in Rogers Farm, it's hard to find a parking spot.
An Uber.
Well, I don't think my wife drive me around, I guess I could. So it's, you know, the mayor and I talked about it, I believe in people's rights. A lot of people move to Platteville because we're not restricted with some of these HOA type communities. I don't argue that point, but there needs to be a balance between respect for your neighbors and like with me, when all my kids come home and 4 of them are driving, you know, I give my neighbors a heads up. And we're cool, you know, because they have family and holidays, and I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to another neighbor. So I don't know what you've heard, but I wanted to just bring it forward to the board that I've been dealing with parking issues, both on private property and on streets. Adrian's been fully aware of that. And there's sometimes some very judgmental gray areas in the code. Like what is a hard surface, what is a side yard setback, so on and so forth, but dealing with it. But I deal with it, Nick, because at the end of the day, they become one of my biggest complaints that I get, so I might as well just deal with it, to be honest with you. So.
Now, working through those technicalities, like the definition of hard surface, I mean, if it's not in there, are you putting something in there so it's on the books, black and white, so people can refer back to it? I mean, it seems like you just kind of, if I say, well, it's not in there defined, but this is what we consider a hard surface, it could be
Concrete or rock.
well, I mean, something that's a hard surface. I mean, rocks are hard. It's just not.
I think the definitions are fine. It's just people will interpret it. Because what I get is next to a driveway, someone has a 10-foot side yard, where at one point it may have been gravel, but now it's covered in weeds, so they don't spray or cut the weeds. So I tell them, okay, you have a hard surface, but it's not really there anymore because it looks bad. So spray your weeds, kill them, or put some more road base or rock, make it a hard surface again.
Okay.
You know, stuff like that. That's what I mean. I mean, I've had those arguments for years. But basically, not on grass, not on dirt. You know, some people will spend the money to pave it because they have a nice camper. Others, they just have an extra car, they'll just throw some rock or some road base down. It may not look great, but it meets code. So, I don't take it lightly because as the mayor and I have been talking, people really get irate about some of this stuff, and we're trying to address it the best we can.
We have to understand that we want to be proud of our town.
And it's a property value issue, it's a respect issue. I can't tell people they can't own 15 cars, but I can tell them where to park it sometimes, and they can't just pave their whole front yard and start stack parking, because that concerns me. I see that happening next. I'm gonna have to put a stop to it. And if people don't ask, and then I have to go tell them to rip it out, that's their fault, not mine.
I'm a neighbor, drives up to the front door and gets out. Like, really?
And I take the blame. I mean, we've had a part-time person 4 hours a day for the last 6-8 months because I've had struggle hiring somebody, and with this going around, it seems like I've finally got at least a couple people willing to do the job.
Well, I think the problem just is gonna keep getting worse, because as you have one household move out, then you have 3 families move into a house. That just automatically adds the number of cars. I just don't see it getting better anytime soon, but I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, and we've been down that road too, not too long ago, on multifamily and housing, and it's not, if I can prove somebody is in R1, single family, i.e. Rogers Farm or Reed subdivision, and they're renting out rooms to college kids, that's easy for me to enforce. I can prove that. But when you have extended family moving in, parents, cousins, children, that's per code, it's family. Because you're gonna have 2 non-family members and unlimited amount of family members living in the property. Unless it becomes a safe builder fire code issue. So talking about enforceability, I can't walk
What
in.
is fire code? I mean, fire department needs access to a house in case of a fire. If it's barricaded by cars.
Fire department told us years ago, because we were talking about RVs and campers and on side yards, and I can approach Chief Durkee again, but they said, you know, as long as the streets, they'll just stop in the middle of the street and they'll just pull the hoses. if there's a car blocking the way, like they show on TV all the time, they'll push it to the side, or they'll throw a hose right through the windows. They don't care. I asked him about alleys, he said the fire trucks won't go down alleys. Rarely ever will they ever go down the alley. They'll fight the fire from the street side.
Well, in our case, we don't have any water in the alleys as it is.
Yeah.
All the hydrants are street side.
Right.
Can I make a quick comment, if I may? Directly across the street from us on
If you come to
Goodrich
the
Court.
podium and state your name and address, please.
Sorry.
Oh, we're not complaining about anybody specific.
I'm not gonna mention names or addresses,
Okay.
Okay, fair enough.
but a perfect example, the house directly across the street from us has 3 passenger cars, 3 work trucks, and 2 work trailers. And on a daily basis, the work truck and one of the trailers is up in the yard. It's every day. And I don't know if they own their own business or what they're doing, but it has become an eyesore. Because over the years that they've lived there, I think they've been there 4 or 5 years now, the amount of vehicles has increased. So, by the way, Curtis Mork, 723 Goodrich Court, sorry. But yeah, no, I understand. We had a similar situation several years ago where the people at the end of Goodrich Court, right as you turn on to Goodrich Court, they were running their own like scrap metal business, and their garage and driveway were completely full of scrap metal, and luckily they were renting the home, and I believe the landlords finally told them to get out because it was turning into a junkyard. I know it's hard to accommodate everybody, but that's a little too much.
How would you address getting the vehicles off if they don't, I ain't saying the word comply, but, I mean,
Well, on private property, if it's on the street, I can tow within 3 days, if it's inoperable or abandoned or if it's parked
but
illegally.
if it's in their yard, that's their
Private
property.
property is a whole different matter, like today, I mean, we've already sent people to court, they've made their first appearance. Judge will typically give them another 30 days, so it's not a quick process. It takes 2, 3, 4 months sometimes, you know. And once they get into the courtroom, I step out. The prosecuting attorney may ask me my opinion on this case, but I don't discuss anything. I have to be impartial. The judge has to be impartial. I don't. I can be biased. It's our town. But I can't interfere with his ruling. Today alone, the state bill representative was here for about 4 hours, and I got a whole page of warnings he issued, and I got 4 court tickets. He's going to send people to court for next month. Private property, it takes time. It frustrates people because they want immediate action. And if somebody parks, you know, like Curtis mentioned, a truck and a trailer right in the middle of the front yard in the middle of mud, I can't legally move it. I run a ticket. Next court date, we have one day a month, usually the 3rd to Thursday. We're gonna make first appearance unless I can talk to the prosecuting attorney that this is immediate. I need to be immediately removed. They'll typically get a month to get something done, and that's just the process. I can't control that.
Should we add this to an agenda or have a study session?
Probably a study session, because there's probably with the new code officer, an opportunity, maybe this next month, where I can introduce her, our 2 final candidates or females. Introduce that person and have, I like to do an annual discussion on code.
Maybe they have some ideas and thoughts.
Maybe they have some ideas, and I know the one time years ago, we had a code study session and we had a packed house. Completely packed house here. Not as much as the last meeting, but close. But that's when we changed some regulations on RV parking, inoperable vehicles that are classics. People take advantage of the basketball goals on the streets, you know, kids playing in the streets. They don't remove the basketball goals, the temporary ones off the sidewalk of the street, so we gotta get on there about that. But it will help having somebody here every day, Monday through Friday. Because we have, when people start pointing out their boats and their campers for summertime, which they already are, it's gonna get 10 times worse. It really will. So I just want to fully disclose that to the board. It's happening. The mayor is aware of it. You may hear some kickback, but I've got to get strict with some people, and they don't like it.
well, I think with freedom, there's responsibility with it. You can't have it and just neglect the responsibility to take care of your own property.
Preach that to my kids the last 20 years. Treat them with responsibility. That's all I have. Any questions for the board?
Any other questions for Mr. Rankin? Okay, I don't have any updates at this time. Unless you guys have any questions. Are there committee meeting, anything to add?
I'd like to announce the obituary for the finance committee. There is very little interest in, that I had a couple of individuals initially that showed some interest, but since then, not enough to create a quorum. So I took performance services and declared the patient dead.
Well, no offense, Mr. Clark, makes me feel good we're doing something right to go on upward about our budget.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah. I would have expected more, but it is kind of dry material with.
You really have to like numbers.
Yeah, you have to be a number cruncher, so it's an illness, and some of us have it, some of us
Well, I
don't.
didn't say I wanted to lead it, I'm not a number cruncher.
What do you guys think about a beautification committee? Is that, something, like we have the parks committee, right, but we can't do anything outside of the parks to clean up the town, right? Is that in our purview? You know what I mean? We'll take it on if we're allowed
Just-
to.
I would just like to suggest defining what that means.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
that's a very
Broad
interpretive
term,
word for a
yes.
lot of people. They could mean junk cars. I mean, it could mean all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
So, but, that could be another
Like a,
discussion.
Right.
like a subcommittee. And there's nothing wrong with citizens starting their own group.
Certainly.
No, we don't have to do,
Right.
No, we don't.
I can't control that. A lot of communities will have, I've been watching on Nextdoor and I've been hearing some stuff about trash cleanup. I've been hearing for years about the little shot bottles on the way back and forth to school. I don't think people realize it's not just.
I didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah, what was that on? Yeah, like,
Last
what they
summer-
said was, Jack Daniels shooters, somewhere in, where was it, Roger Farm or something?
I thought Grand Avenue between Olive and River.
And I pick up on division by the schools biannually, and that's majority of what I pick up is those little bottles.
Really?
Another paraphernalia. It's all, I hate to be generalized, but it's all stuff that people are throwing out of their cars, right? It's not trash that's blowing
incriminating
around. It's
evidence.
not,
Oh, right.
it's not home trash that
Oh,
we're
right,
picking
right.
up.
I see what
It's
you're
litter, right? Would more signs, litter signs help?
Oh.
And we've had them run over from what I've seen.
Literally,
right?
That's what they think of our signs.
Here's a shooter.
Too drunk to read the sign.
In a true statement, I had a meeting with CDOT this morning and address the side topic that in previous years, I get on, I see, we need more right away through Platteville. The weeds are getting too high, people complain. And Platteville, Platteville only mow one time a year. But I also know they've made comments that they don't mow on a regular basis because it exposes all the trash people throw out in the right of ways on the side of the highways. Which, again, the last summer when they let it roll short, if you drove up to Greeley and back, it was so bad.
Oh, it was awful. Yeah.
Terrible. But, maybe, an adopt a street committee or something like that, like some kind of thing.
I've had a lot of people interested in that, different groups in town taking a street, so.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't
Like
know
adopt a highway program type,
But in.
but adopt it.
I'll look into that, how those are put together, how those are typically stewarded. Talk about that.
That would be awesome.
Not just if that happened, just some safety features like some vests, proper, and a lot of committees, if a group goes out there, they pick them up, the local, not put it on David anymore, but a lot of times the trash company or whoever works at the end of the day, so you dump all your bags right here and we'll grab it for you. It's just a partnership. That's how my hometown back in Kansas does. They do that once a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the town invest in just a tiny bit to get rid of trash, and the community's like, well, we'll help the town clean it up. That's kind of the mentality. I don't know if it'll happen here or not. Just an idea.
Well, thanks to Larry, it seems to be doing well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges.
Good start.
That's right, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, go check out Dollar General now.
Do you wanna add that to the study session when we talk about code, the discussion for that?
Yeah, sure.
Or that'd be
Adopt
too
the
soon?
street.
It ties in together.
Yeah.
Kind of coincide.
I should be
So,
able to have it.
When's the study session?
Okay, thank you.
I would say May, because I'm gonna
Okay.
hopefully make an offer, then a couple weeks notice. Both of them said they'd probably start right away, roughly. But I wanna get them trained and kind of get their feet wet, so to speak, before I throw them to you. I don't wanna scare them off yet. I want them to have at least their first paycheck.
Well, and if they, we start asking them questions, they've gotta know what we're talking about.
Exactly, in all seriousness, I and visit the community, so you start referencing Bella Vista or Shoals, whatever, you know where that's at. So,
Okay.
okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Any other committee news? Anything else before the board? Okay, we're adjourned.
Last chance for saying no, if they want to go, I'm not going.
They turned out good.
Oh, I'm going. Anybody else?
Troy Blum is going.
Oh, is he going? No, Nick?
No, it's just you and Troy.
Oh.
So, Aurora, the Smith Road, yeah, 6 miles of that road is on UP property. They never looked at the agreement.
Yeah.
Their UP was charging their standard check like $5,100 a year. It's all for 6 miles of the right of way release.
Yeah.
And then finally UP opened up their books. It went from 15 to 1.5. Yeah. Aurora's about to shut down Smith Road, like, which is a major, right in there. Because, yeah, these negotiations, yeah.
About 6 weeks or so.
You say?
One day a week.
Yeah.
She's married.
Monday.